So, Bunny, anybody who knows anything about interiors and is a fan of interiors knows about you. I mean, you are an icon in the industry, to be honest. But I don't know if everyone knows that you're also a master gardener and a big fan of outdoor entertaining, right? Tell us a little bit about your passion for outdoor entertaining and gardening.
Well, I think that when years and years ago, I still live in New York, and since I grew up in the country, I wanted to get my hands in the dirt. I've always loved gardening. I loved it when I was a kid in Virginia, and I was married, and I wanted a house in the country, and I wanted it really because I wanted to create a garden. I wanted a vegetable garden. I wanted flowers to cut. All those things just are important to me, and they are so much a part of the interior. The indoor-outdoor connection is, I think, so important. So we bought this house, and I started creating a garden. I knew nothing. And I literally ordered my first garden from Wayside Gardens. They gave me the plan and all the plants, and I put it in the ground. But what's been fun is the evolution of learning about gardening, learning to be a better gardener. Needless to say, now that my career I'm busier, I don't do all the gardening myself. I have help, but there's nothing I love more than on a pretty day getting out, deadheading, weeding, going to the greenhouse in the winter. And so much of gardening is the things that go along with the garden. It's the plants are one thing, but the kind of what I call the accoutrements, the containers, and that's what I think is hard to find, and it's sort of what inspired this collection.
Ah, wonderful. So when you talk, a moment ago you were talking about interiors and exteriors sort of in your mind being very similar when you design them and you decorate them. How does that interpret into what you're designing for Ballard? I know you have a beautiful, giant new arbor, right? It's almost like a room that you sit down outside.
Well, again, to me, the arbor is an entranceway. It's like a doorway. In Connecticut, it is an arbor between one garden and another area. So just like in the interior, you have a door that leads you from one space to another. That's what an arbor can do. And it's a piece of architecture on the outside. I also think it gives structure to garden, and it also gives you something to grow vines on, to have clematis or passion flowers. So, and it also gives you height in a garden, and it's a wonderful feeling to go through it from one space to another. And I think arbors are very important.
It's a moment.
It's a moment.
So the one that we have is based on the one in your garden.
Yes.
And then you have a couple other really large items, a trellis, just big structural things like you're saying. And when I think about outside, I'm thinking about, I need some planters, but you really are going big.
Well, the sky is big. There is I always say there's no roof overhead. In a house you might have an 8-foot ceiling. On the outside, you have an unlimited space because the sky is ethereal. And what I love about big objects in the garden, even a small garden, it's a punctuation. The lattice planter, again, it gives you height in a garden. It gives you architecture, and it all of a sudden makes you look up. When you walk through a garden, if everything is low, you're always looking down. And I think it's important to stand up and look up, and that's why I love tall things in a garden.
So once I get that big structure, whether it's walls or whether it's a trellis or an arbor, how do I decorate inside those walls? What do I do?
Well, it so much depends on the scale of the area that you're working in. If you have, say, the side of your house, or you're out on a terrace, there's a wonderful new planter that we've made both on legs and that can sit on the ground. Again, it's a planter that's about, I think it's about 30 inches tall, and that can be planted with annuals in the summer, geraniums. You can have ivy spilling out. So it's a planter that gives you a little bit of height and gives you a container to make almost like a flower arrangement, but you do it with plants.
Okay.
And that's what containers are about. I've always said if I didn't have a garden per se, I'd have a container garden. I can go outside on a small terrace and put a number of containers and do really wonderful summer plantings with annuals, and that can be my garden.
Absolutely, and it can also serve as even a barrier between you and your neighbor if
No
you're
question.
in a small space.
No question.
Yeah, and the Shipman planter you're talking about, you can take it with you.
Right.
If you are in an apartment, it doesn't have to be a permanent item. It goes with you wherever you go.
Right, right. And containers do move around. I mean, even the containers I have, I might put them one place one summer, but the next year I put them someplace else. So they're not permanent. They don't always have to just stay in the same place. And you even could have a planter that in the summer you use outside, but maybe you bring it inside in the winter and put it in your dining room and fill it full of plants. So you can use them in lots of different places.
Great idea. I love that idea of taking a container inside, but even outside, elevating them on plant stands. You have a couple plant stands.
Yes, because I find that when I have so many plants in containers, and I find when they're all lined up on the ground, they're not as interesting than if I can have them at different heights.
Right.
And that's why I've introduced some plant stands. They're very different in style, but I like them mixed together. You can put you could put a palm tree on one, you could put just a lower plant on another, but it gives you different heights, and I think it makes the arrangement of the plant so much more interesting.
Absolutely. Well, one of your new introductions that I fell in love with when I visited your house is this rush seat chair that has a pivoting back. Where did that come from?
It came, actually, the original John and I bought in Morocco. John Rosselli, my husband, and I love to travel, and we particularly love to travel where there are people who make things. And we were literally in a village, and they were just making these simple chairs out of pieces of wood and braiding the rush on it. I mean, they were, I think, a chair probably used in every little house. I mean, it was not a fancy chair. It was so comfortable, and the rush had a give to it, and the back moves back and forth. So we bought several of them, came back to Connecticut. They sat up at our pool house, and they really are incredibly comfortable. They're not weatherproof, so I would suggest if somebody used them, I mean, they can get wet, but you put them away in the winter, or I have them under cover. They're lightweight, so they can move around, and it just gives you extra seating, on a porch or by your pool or a pool house or wherever, because, when everybody gathers outside, you want plenty of places for people to sit, and these don't take up a lot of space.
Absolutely. And I love that they're just so unique looking. They don't look like an outdoor piece of furniture.
No.
I love it. Well, okay, so you have so many beautiful decorative things that you've designed, and you've taken that and applied it to the detail of the garden's practical things like hose guides and edging for your gardens. The detail of that, talk about how that appeals to you.
When you do a lot of gardening, if you're out there trying to water your plants, which you have to do constantly, particularly in the summer, and there's this big long hose, and the next thing you know, it's caught in the corner of the perennial bed or the vegetables, and it's ripping into the lettuce or whatever. And you're like, wait a minute. So the hose guides, I have them in the corner of all my gardens, whether it's the perennial bed or the vegetable garden, they're in the corner. So when I go to water, it keeps the hose out of the dirt in the garden. And it's really a guide. And it just makes the watering a lot easier than me trying to pick up this heavy hose all the time and keep it from harming the plants.
Yeah, knocking over your hydrangea.
So it really does help. And also keeping I love the edges of gardens to be neat, and often some sort of edging material is great. We've done it in a cast material that looks like rope. We've done it in a woven piece. So it keeps, if you have grass up to the dirt, it keeps that edge neat. Years ago, people would, by hand, go and edge a border. You've got to be very skilled, and it takes a lot of time because the grass wants to go right into the dirt quickly. So these edging materials keep that line neat. I have it in my garden with gravel on one side and dirt on the other, because if I didn't have it, the gravel would mix in with the dirt. So it's just it's a maintenance thing as well as, I think, a decorative and very pretty.
A beautiful detail.
Yeah.
Well,
Great.
thanks for walking us through your garden today, Bunny.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and I'm so excited with this new collection.
We are too.